At a service at Manchester Cathedral this morning, prayers were said for the victims of Monday's bomb attack. As the city, the country, still mourns, the vital questions continue to be asked. What more could have been done? What should be done now? After all, the security services say there are 3,000 extremists at large who just might go on to carry out a similar atrocity. The Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, speaking to Robert Peston on ITV, called for more resources.
It seems that the cuts in police numbers have led to some very dangerous situations emerging. It's also a question of a community response as well, so that where an imam, for example, alerts the police that he's very concerned about somebody, I would hope they would act. And I hope they would have the resources to act as well.
The Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, told Andrew Marr on the BBC some terrorists involved in the attack could still be at large. But she said generally the current system of electronic tagging plus tight conditions on where a suspect lives, known as TPIMs, was working.
The security services and the police have the tools that they need. We don't have control orders, we have TPIMs. They're more robust in legislation and we use them effectively. We are in constant discussion with the intelligence services and with the police to make sure that we have the right tools that they need. They have the ability to come to us, come to me as Home Secretary, and for me to sign off TPIMs. We will do that where we need to.
But one former senior police officer is calling for more radical action. Tarique Ghaffur was Assistant Commissioner for Central Operations at the Metropolitan Police. He helped investigate the 7/7 London tube and bus bombings, which killed 52 people, and was in charge of security at the Olympic Games. He started his policing career in Manchester, becoming the highest-ranking Muslim officer in Britain.
On the back of the terrible atrocities in Manchester, the figures of number of people who are contaminated on the fringes of contamination are quite astounding. They're talking about 3,000 potential suspects. They're talking about 400 people potentially coming back from Syria. They're talking about nearly now 20,000 people who may be in some form of list. So when you total all this up, the remedies that are being suggested in relation to this very large number of people who pose potential danger in communities are just not workable. You just will not have the resources to put the surveillance out there or to even put people under house arrest. What I believe on the back of what has happened is to think of some new approaches to a problem that is going to stay with us for a long time. And one of my proposals was that we should be setting up potentially regional, because this is not a problem just in one part of the country, all over the country, set up community protection centres, and these centres are set up with the cooperation of the communities, with appropriate oversight. And at these centres, effectively, information or intelligence will be fed in relation to the people who are, radicalized or on the tip of being radicalized, and for these people to actually get community protection orders against them and put them in the centres, and where they would undergo effectively very significant debrief. There would be a risk assessment, there would be a theological assessment of their warped views, and out of that would come some response in relation to action to be taken. And at
that amounts to internment, doesn't it?
Well, it does, but not to there's a fundamental difference here. Of course, internment has been done before when we had the IRA problems, but here this is more a community-based approach. To a certain extent, yes, those people who in fact pose the greatest danger, of course they would be and have to be interned. You can't just leave so many people who potentially could create the kind of atrocities that have been created in Manchester just free at will to roam about in their communities and potentially contaminate further people in the communities. You have to take some very, very practical action, and to be honest, this action can only be taken with some independent oversight, whether it is judicial plus community oversight.
But you would in essence be locking people up for what they thought, what they believed, rather than what they'd done.
Yes, but the initial assessment would be a compulsory assessment, and then in that assessment, if there is proper regulated action in terms of some of these people's warped views can be changed, then of course they will go back into the community. But at the very extreme, of course, yes, there is no other option. What is the option? They commit the crime. or then, they are locked up, and then, of course, a number of these in the next 2-3 years will be coming back into the communities. My suggestion is to make communities safe. My suggestion is a practical one, and people should be thinking not why not to do it, should be thinking how it can actually be developed and taken forward.
So if people went through this procedure, if they were re-educated, if you like, they would be let go. But if they didn't, if they stuck to their beliefs, they would be locked up forever without trial?
No, I would even go to more extent. One of the other things that I'm actually talking about is a complete review of the political asylum system and relook through cold case reviews of people who have come here. And if necessary, yes, they'll have their passports withdrawn, they would go through a judicial process in terms of locking them up if necessary. Because otherwise, just the procedure, if you take Abu Qatada, it took 16 years for him to be removed from here when there was a prima facie case that he'd been involved in the kind of activities, negative activities that he'd been involved in. So yes, I think there would be a section of people who would be locked up until to the point where they are deemed to, in a structured and a safe way, go back into the communities, or they can go back to where they came from.
How do you think Muslim communities would react to your proposals?
Actually, I've been quite surprised, really. Surprised in the sense that individual Muslim community members, and you've seen them go on media and condemn exactly what has happened, constantly condemn that this is not Islam, etc. What I have not seen so far is collective condemnation, by either mainstream Muslim groups, whether they're from House of Lords or members of Parliament or they're mainstream Muslim organizations. And that is why I'm calling for those collective groups to give a fatwa in relation to the safety and the harm that is being created to the communities collectively. And of course, I'm, a moderate Muslim. I'm not, looking at this from any political, or I'm purely looking at it from a neutral agenda of community safety.